I quit buying comics. I don't buy comics anymore. I don't buy new comics anymore specifically, and I don't read them either. I don't even pirate them. The Ninja Turtles were created in the pages of a comic book, but the new books just don't connect with me. So I'd like to explain why I stopped buying comic books and why I quit reading comics as well. Some of it has to do with the comic book industry in general, but a lot of it has to do with the comic book company IDW Publishing. IDW has been publishing the TMNT comics since 2011, and since I started reading comics in 2016 or 2017. If I had to summarize this video, I would say I quit reading comics because of IDW Publishing. Real quick, a little bit of my history with the TMNT comics. I own pretty much every Ninja Turtles comic book. I have over 1,700 Ninja Turtles comic books. Pretty much everything from 1984 to 2024. I've read them all. Fleetway, Image, Dreamwave, all the Turtles appearances and other comic books. So I don't know if that makes me a tourist or not, and frankly I don't care if you want to call me a tourist. I do have a life outside of comic books. I know for some people comic books are their whole life and their whole mission in life, but not for me. Before we get into the TMNT comics, I wanted to mention a couple things IDW has done with other comic books they've published. First of all, they seem to only hire transgender or LGBTQ people. In addition to a transgender person writing the TMNT comics and a non-binary person drawing the TMNT comics, they have another transgender on Star Trek and a non-binary on Sonic the Hedgehog, among many others. In their Sonic the Hedgehog comic, IDW allowed their non-binary they-them artists to promote porn in the comic books to their readers, which includes kids. And they didn't just advertise regular porn. This is going to be explicit, so pause if you need to. The non-binary they-them artist recommended the book Gender Queer, which features graphic pictures of gay kids blowing each other. Illustrated gay child porn. IDW promoted child porn. Even My Little Pony thought IDW Publishing was too freaky. Yes, the brand behind Bronies thought that this company was just too weird. IDW Publishing used to publish My Little Pony comics, but they lost the license. My Little Pony is fine with grown men dressing up like ponies and running around, whacking each other off, but they drew the line with this comic book company. My Little Pony thought IDW was too weird. I never thought I would say it, but I'm with My Little Pony. IDW Publishing has too much baggage and they're too weird. So back to Ninja Turtles comics. IDW Publishing employed Sophie Campbell, a transgender writer and artist, to make TMNT comics. The book immediately changed tone and became a gay, trans, romance-heavy, furry fanfic you would see on Tumblr. It became all about relationships. It became a soapbox. Sophie Campbell focused the comic on Jenica, a new lesbian Ninja Turtle, and her fat pig girlfriend. Sophie Campbell also drew the teenage Turtle brothers engaging in incest outside of the comics. What is going on in comic books? Do you understand why I quit reading them? Incest? There's no coming back from that. I don't want to see the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles making out with each other. I think that's a pretty weird thing to draw. Why would IDW hire Sophie Campbell? This is inappropriate. I just can't forget 5 years of Sophie Campbell. 50 issues 101 through 150. I just can't move on. I want an apology. IDW deserves to be punished. I want justice. But the comic industry hasn't learned their lesson. I think they've turned off millions of people permanently. Sophie Campbell went on to work for a Supergirl comic with another transgender artist at DC Comics. Who is this for? Transgender Supergirl comics? IDW Publishing even has a TMNT scholar, an unofficial TMNT historian who gushes all about the gay stuff in the comics. They celebrate this nonsense. They think it's great. They're proud of it. Here's the so-called TMNT historian, Patrick Ellers, in his own words, speaking about Sophie Campbell's run on the Turtles.
Sophie's issues and like her run from 101 to 150 is so delightfully queer. And like the trans allegories are all over that run, and it just rules.
Delightfully queer? Delightfully queer? Who talks like that? How gay do you have to be to talk like that? Who do they think is reading this? Full of trans allegories? These are supposed to be Ninja Turtles comic books. These comics are too political. Anytime someone says something is too political, they're just saying it was poorly written. And these comics are too political. I don't mind an allegory, but these comics are poorly written. There are political messages in everything, but when it's jammed in and obvious and foreign, it's distracting. I don't want to read comics made by transgender people whose main goal is sneaking gay stuff into the comics and trying to convert people to be gay and trans. Doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't make for good entertainment. It's just gay marketing that's barely disguised as a comic. By the way, Patrick, the TMNT historian, thinks Renette is pronounced Renee. I don't think he knows what he's talking about. He doesn't understand what makes the TMNT special. And IDW Publishing is almost exclusively full of people who don't understand what makes the TMNT special. IDW did tone down the gayness in their recent Turtles relaunch, but I assume they crank up the gayness and political stuff as soon as they feel they can get away with it again, when the dust settles. The same people still work for this company. They'll fall back on their old tricks. They're just biding their time. They're releasing Casey Jones and Shredder comics instead of another Jennika miniseries, but just know it's a matter of time before Jennika the lesbian Ninja Turtle reappears in the comic books. These people really seem to hate their audience. They resent their fans for some reason. One of IDW's artists even attacked me personally. I said comic book readers really don't care what comic creators get paid. We just want to read the comic books. It's not our issue. An IDW publishing artist, Chris Burnham, tweeted me and said he hopes I lose everything that's important to me. I make a reasonable critique about creator pay, and this unhinged weirdo essentially wishes death on me and my family. Yeah, I don't care what you get paid. You're 50 years old. Go cry about it, you loser. And I'm not just a fan that used to buy comics. I used to talk about comics and promote them for free weekly on my YouTube channel. How dumb do you have to be to attack a fan, especially one that promotes your comics for free to an audience? The comic industry is full of people like Chris Burnham. The people in comics are almost all intensely political, and they're almost all left-wing. It just creates an unbalanced environment. It's an echo chamber, void of creativity. Here's a list of TMNT creators that quit Twitter after Elon Musk bought it and eased up on censorship. Sophie Campbell, Chris Burnham, Kevin Eastman, Eric Burnham, Sean Lee, S.L. Gallant, Ben Bishop, Roy Mercado, and Sarah Meyer, among others. Keep in mind, all Elon Musk did, the only thing he really changed was he just stopped censoring people. He let people speak. And these left-wing comic artists don't want to share a social media platform with people they disagree with unless they're censored. They're too sensitive. These people want to live in an echo chamber where everyone agrees, and if you disagree, you get punished. They aren't even willing to engage with people they disagree with. They're totally closed-minded. They have this hive mind that is just terrible. I don't want to read partisan comics that all share one perspective. I actually enjoy hearing different viewpoints and voices. But these comic people are so brainwashed, they think anything they disagree with is hate speech. And I'm not some super right-wing guy. I'm not a conservative. I'm not really political. I would think it's just as weird and annoying if comic book companies got all their creators from Truth Social. It's just so tedious. Let's check out the social media profile of the TMNT editor for IDW Publishing, Andy Curry. Look at all these political posts. They're all political posts. Is he in comics or politics? Look at this. Politics, 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 comics. The ratio of politics to comics is like 20-1. Anyone that's hyper into politics like this is a total spaz, and almost everyone in comics is a total spaz. The stereotypes are true. Is there one person in mainstream comics that isn't a raging leftist? I can name 1,000 hardcore Democrats, but I can't name one Republican. Is there one Republican? Not even a Republican. Is there one person who will publicly say they are not a liberal or not political? It's like you can't even be a non-political person in comics, and I don't want to read political comics. I'm not a cheerleader for some political party that doesn't care about me. Comic book companies ditched their loyal fan base of comic book readers in exchange for far-left political commentators and LGBTQ activists. They found the only people that are nerdier than comic book readers. Why did they do this? I'll never understand why they traded comic book readers for these people. The LGBTQ are loud on social media, but there's really not a lot of them in real life, and they don't move the dial for revenue at all. And speaking of revenue, I suggest not giving these comic companies any revenue. I recommend buying old TMNT comics. Buy used. I recommend reading the original 62-issue Mirage run, plus the micro issues from the 80s, before you buy or read any new comics from IDW Publishing. You probably don't even need to buy it. You could probably just go borrow it from your local library. Check out the old stuff before you check out the new stuff. You're not changing your life, you're just not buying new comics. Don't reward them for this. You'll save hundreds of dollars and tons of time. And the old comics really are better than the new comics. They told great original stories with endings and morals. I'm not some OG comics guy with nostalgia for the 80s or something. I only started reading comics a few years ago. The comics used to be standalone stories with an ending. Now each issue just leads into the next. New comics just bleed each issue into the next issue and drag every story out. Nothing ever happens. It never goes anywhere. 1 year of modern comic stories is like 2 minutes in a movie or TV show. The TMNT comic relaunch from IDW started like 11 months ago, and they'd barely be through an opening scene. I don't have the patience for this painfully decompressed style of storytelling. There's no payoff. I think there's some weird ego issues going on in the comic industry too. I think the success of comic book movies went to their head. But comic movie success didn't translate into comic book success. And now, the comic book people are bitter and resentful. They thought they were all going to be movie stars, but now they're just uncredited storyboard artists for movie companies. Their egos also get inflated at comic book conventions. Nerds and geeks pay to wait in line just to give a compliment to their favorite creator. The creators don't realize that they're dealing with a very small portion of the population. They got used to having their butts kissed at Comic-Cons with lines of people waiting to see them. But most people don't buy comic books. Most people don't read comic books. They think comics are dorky and lame and full of poorly written slop for soy-faced fanboys. And guess what? They're right. These comics don't sell that well. Most people don't buy comics. IDW's finances are on the ropes. They aren't doing well. During a recent review of their financial results, IDW said they're not doing well, but they will be in business for another year. It sounds ominous. It sounds like they're hoping they'll be in business for another year. Or maybe they'll be closed in 1 year and 1 day. It sounds like they're having serious financial trouble. It sounds like weak sales would put them out of their misery. It sounds like TMNT fans should quit buying TMNT comics from IDW Publishing. I hate hurting an American company, but they're hurting an American franchise. The Turtles would be better with a new company instead of IDW. Also, IDW is hardly American. They don't care. Time to start fresh. Time to let it die. They had a great run. Instead of putting out one good book, IDW pushes out 10 TMNT comic books to try and extract as much money from the audience as possible. They're trying to bleed you dry with this slop. Also, your local comic book shop, it's just not sustainable. And they're suffering. They're selling Funko Pops. Comics won't go away. They'll figure out a new business model. But this chapter of comic books and the comic book industry, it needs to end. Sometimes you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. I'm sure something better will rise out of the ashes. Can you even imagine comic book shops being open in 10 years to sell little pieces of paper? I find it ironic that almost every person in comic books is far left and believe deeply in climate change, but their entire industry is based on printing out millions of pieces of paper weekly, shipping the paper around the world in trucks and planes, and then tens of thousands of comic book fans drive to a local shop to buy millions of these pieces of paper every week. The comic industry is terrible for the environment. They're selling paper. The whole industry is just printing and shipping paper. And they print out 10 copies. They print out 10 versions of the same comic with different covers. What a waste of paper. Total hypocrites. No real principles. IDW Publishing has no plans on changing. They're not reversing course. They are doubling and tripling down. They don't want you to buy their comics. IDW doesn't care about feedback as long as they have your money. If you still buy TMNT comics from IDW Publishing, you pay for this. You paid for all of this. You fund this and you pay their salaries. They wouldn't be in business without you. And they don't care about your opinion. They just want your money. It doesn't matter if you don't like what they're doing or if you complain. They don't want you around. IDW Publishing doesn't respect the characters, the legacy, or you as a customer. What are you holding on to? Walk away. Take your business elsewhere. The Turtles will be fine. They'll end up at another company and we'll have a new launch at a new publisher within a year of IDW closing down. Which publisher would you like to see the Turtles with next? It's going to happen. Think about it. The only way to get the message to IDW Publishing is to not purchase their comics. Don't give them any money. That's the only way to send the message. They hate you.